One of my favorite all-time movies is Forrest Gump. Can I ask how many people have seen Forrest Gump? Oh, almost everyone. Can I ask how many people saw it as soon as it came out that month? Okay, I did too. And now the really geeky question, can I ask how many people, including me, have seen it more than once? Oh, okay, so I'm in good company. But for those of you that have not seen Forrest Gump, or that maybe it's just been a while, I'll remind you that Forrest was a young boy growing up in the South, the southern part of the United States, and his IQ was 75. Now, the principal let his mama know that his IQ needed to be 80, not 75, and therefore he couldn't attend school. He didn't belong there. He was considered stupid. Poor Forrest also had physical impairments as well as mental challenges. He had a curvature of the spine, and so he wore 2 metal braces on his legs. And if I were to say that Forrest got teased a bit when he was growing up, that would be a gross understatement. He was taunted and tormented and tortured for being different. Fortunately for Forrest, he had a mother that loved him unconditionally. Didn't matter what anybody else thought of Forrest. He was the apple of her eye, and she made sure every day that Forrest knew that he was a person of deep worth and value and was loved unconditionally. There's a couple quotes in Forrest Gump that I thought would be helpful to read because there is profound wisdom in some of the most simple lessons that Forrest shared with people as he went through life and shared with all of us as we sat in movie theaters, 20 years ago, and watched. To me, one of the most profound conversations was when Forrest's mom, Mama Gump, was on her deathbed. And Forrest came home to see her. And he comes in the room and says, "What's the matter, Mama?" And she just said very simply, "I'm dying, Forrest." "Why are you dying, Mama?" he responded. "It's my time. It's just my time." "Don't be afraid, sweetheart. Death is just a part of life, something we're all destined to do. I happen to believe that you make your own destiny. You have to do your best with what God gave you." To which Forrest responded, "What's my destiny, Mama?" And she said, "You're going to have to figure that out for yourself." And then probably the most popular and famous line of the whole movie, "Life is like a box of chocolates." Forrest, you never know what you're going to get. And then Forrest said, "Mama always had a way of explaining things that I could understand. How could you not love this movie?" Another character in the movie was Forrest's friend's Dan, and Dan did not have the same perspective at all on destiny or acceptance that Mama Gump had. In fact, Lieutenant Dan was Forrest's lieutenant in the war, and I think it was Vietnam, is that right? In the Vietnamese War, and so he believed that his destiny was to die as a soldier, and he had ancestors who died in every single American war, every war that the U.S. ever fought. He could list all the people that he was related to that died in those wars, and he believed that that was the most noble death. To die as a soldier was the best possible thing you could do with your life, and he planned on dying apparently in Vietnam, but unfortunately for him, he was only severely injured, and doggone it, Forrest saved him. And he was not happy with Forrest because he was supposed to die. That was his destiny. And instead, he thought he was going to have to spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. And he said to Forrest, "You know, you just kind of go through life bouncing around." He didn't believe in any kind of destiny. It's all accidental. You just kind of go through life and land accidentally in different places beyond your control. But the most profound part of the entire movie for me was at the very end when Forrest was at the grave of his wife, Jenny. She had just died. And Jenny was his childhood friend and sweetheart and the only woman he ever loved. And he's standing there at her graveside, and this is what he said to Jenny, laying there underneath the dirt. I don't know if Mama put it right or it's Lieutenant Dan. I don't know if we each have a destiny or all just floating around accidental like on a breeze. But I think maybe it's both. Maybe both are happening at the same time. Listening to such a profound statement caused me to ponder the truth of that statement, because we all know that there are certain things in life that we really have no control over. None of us gets to choose if we're born into this world with a high IQ or a perfect athletic body or a family that loves us for who we are and encourages us to be who we are, or wealth, or anything else for that matter. There are certain things we really have no control over. But there are also a lot of things that we have much, much control over, like what we do with what we're dealt. We get to choose if we're going to go through life being full of gratitude for all of our blessings, or if we want to just complain because there's always somebody else that has more than we have. We get to choose if we are going to be grateful or ungrateful. We get to choose how we respond to our challenges in life. If we're going to see them as walls and roadblocks that are just going to keep us from our dreams and all that we intend to be and do in life, or if our destiny is to figure out how to go through those walls or under them or over them or around them. We really do have a lot in our lives that we can control and decide. And most importantly, we can always control how we react to everything else that happens around us, whether we label those things good, bad, or indifferent. As I was thinking about Forrest Gump this week, it occurred to me that there are several questions that I've thought about often in life about wisdom, and every once in a while I think, how do you know if what you think is real wisdom is actually wisdom, or if it's just something else, something that you might want, but it's not really the best thing or the wisest thing or even a good thing at all? How do you know? And what does it look like to truly live a life of wisdom? What does that look like, and how do you choose that? Well, today's scripture readings, all three of them in fact, give us some really good insights in figuring out how to know wisdom when it shows up in your life, and also how to know what to do with it, because you can recognize it. In the proverb that was read by Larry just a little while ago, we are told to make our ears attentive to wisdom and incline our hearts to understanding. And as you read that entire proverb, you get this sense that there is so much wisdom out there for you. You just have to want it, and you have to trust in it, because it all comes from God. And so the key is trust in God, and also trust in the wisdom that God places within you. In the epistle of James, we read that if you lack wisdom, ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, or ungrudgingly, as it said in this morning's translation. Just ask God and ask in faith. And it's another affirmation that wisdom is everywhere. It's within us and all around us, and we just have to trust that God will give it to us. Ask in faith and believe in it. Believe in God. Believe in the wisdom that comes from God. And then James goes on in chapter 3 to talk about what that wisdom looks like. Who is wise and understanding among you, he asks. And then goes on to say, you live your life accordingly. You show it by living a good life, is exactly what he said. By living a good life. And then he actually goes on to describe what that life looks like. Listen to these words right from James. The wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without a trace of partiality or hypocrisy. In other words, if you see these things in what you think is wisdom, that's wisdom. But if you don't see peace and gentleness and mercy and good fruits, and you do see partiality and hypocrisy and judgment and prejudice, that's not wisdom. So James makes it pretty clear what some of the clues are so that we can know that this is wisdom or that's not wisdom. And then today in the gospel lesson that Larry read for us in the Gospel of Matthew, one of the best lessons on wisdom comes right out of that passage. And the lesson is not everybody will support you in the wisdom that you have, the wisdom that God gives you. So what we have here is a story, basically Matthew from chapter 1 all the way up until the passage that we have in chapter 13, we see Jesus going throughout all of Galilee, imparting wisdom and healing people. And everywhere he goes, people are in awe and they welcome him and they want more of that wisdom. And so Matthew presents this as everywhere Jesus went, people were so appreciative of his wisdom, and they couldn't get enough of it. And so Matthew talks about how Jesus went up to the mountains and down to the valleys. People followed him, and they worshiped him because of his wisdom. He went to the lakeside or the seashore, and he went out to the grain fields. People followed him, and they loved him and worshiped him because of the wisdom he imparted. In their homes and in their synagogues, the same thing. In their cities and out in the wilderness or in the countryside, the same thing. Every single place Jesus went, people were just astounded at his wisdom, except one place, back home. And some of us know what that feeling's like. It may be the actual house that you're from, or it may be the community or your friends, but sometimes in the least expected places, people will not appreciate the wisdom that's in your heart or the wisdom from God. So some of you have heard a little bit of this story before, but when I was 17, I decided I was going to go away to college. I wanted to go to a 4-year college and right away go to seminary. And so I thought, well, the only way to really do that, the best way, is just to start applying to colleges and go. Well, I explained to my mom and dad what my plans were, and I'll just tell you, they saw no wisdom in that whatsoever. In fact, my mom and dad talked after I told them what my plans were, and then my mom sat down with me and just did all that she could do to convince me to not go away to college. She just said, you can't afford it. We can't afford it. You may not get accepted to any of these places. Don't even bother wasting your money for the application fees. You may not be able to cut it. You may not have what it takes to get good enough grades to stay in college. Why don't you just be like your older brother and sister, my favorite words, of course, and go to the community college, because that's what your sister did, and she's doing just fine. She forgot to mention that she married a husband that had a master's degree and a really good job. But anyway, and then your brother, he's doing just fine there. And you know what? If you decide to stay home, we'll pay for just about everything. room and board, car insurance. You can use the car most of the time. But if you leave for college, you get nothing. And I'll tell you, I almost didn't go away to college or seminary. I thought, well, maybe I can't make it on my own. Maybe I don't have what it takes. Maybe the money won't be there. But one of my best friend's mom, when I was talking to my friend about this, she was overhearing what I was saying, and she said, look, Alan, you've got great grades. You did really well on the SAT, and you will get into a really good college if you apply. I guarantee it. And you will get financial aid. And between grants and scholarships, you'll work some to make sure you get your way through, but you can do it. And whatever else you need, there are loans for people just like you that want to go to college that can't figure out how to do the whole thing on your own. And so that's what I did. Now, I don't say this because I was this great person that went away to college, but because I didn't get the support where I expected it. The wisdom that I thought was wisdom, and looking back, I believe was, I didn't get the support or even the affirmation that that was wisdom where I thought that I would get it. But the affirmation and the support came from someone else. And so there's a few lessons in here that I want to leave you with today from the scriptures and the stories. First of all, ask God for wisdom. And then when God gives you the wisdom, trust God and trust the wisdom. Secondly, make sure that you spend time with people that affirm your wisdom. And it doesn't mean that the people who don't affirm it are bad people. I think my parents loved me unconditionally. It was just that they didn't understand what was going on inside my head and my heart. And there will always be people out there that will want to squash your dreams and the things that you feel like you want to do with your life. There will always be those people out there, maybe in your family or maybe in your church, maybe in your community. But that's the other thing. There wasn't a lot of people in my church that said, Alan, you can do it, go do it. But it just took one person to say, Alan, you can do it. I promise you'll get into a good college, and I know that you will have the money that you need to get through. And so because of this one person by the name of Joanne, I went away to college. And the month after I graduated, I started my master's degree at Fuller Theological Seminary and eventually was ordained and became a minister in the United Church of Christ. I sometimes wonder if it wasn't for Joanne, would I even be standing here today? Would I have even gone to college in the first place? So the next point is, the final point really, be that person for others. Be that person so that other people will trust you and share their wisdom with you, and you say to them, hallelujah, you can do it. I see that wisdom, and I've got your back. I believe in you. Just like Forrest Gump's mom believed in him. And of course, it's a make-believe story, but I can't tell you how many people I've met in my life that have told me, I was Forrest Gump. I had people tell me, you're no good, you're a loser, you're stupid, you'll never amount to anything. And yet it just took one other person to tell me that they were all wrong. It just took one other person to believe in me. And therefore, I am where I am today. Maybe some of you can think of that same scenario in your life. I recently saw another movie called Won't You Be My Neighbor? And it's the story of Mr. Rogers. It was playing in Lihue this past week. And I'll tell you, Mr. Rogers was teased for decades for being a big old geek, for being quirky, geeky, and just not very cool. He was Mr. Uncool. But I grew up loving Mr. Rogers nevertheless, because you know what? He was who he was. And he loved each and every child that came to Mr. Rogers' neighborhood for who they were. And he would tell children, you're perfect just the way you are. You are lovable just the way you are. There's nothing you need to change about who you are to get my affection. He happened to also be a minister in the Presbyterian Church, and his love for children came from his love from God, because he was one of those children that didn't feel quite right about himself when he was growing up. And so his message to all these children and their parents and the world was, you're perfect just the way you are. Spread that to everybody else. Allow people to be who they are. That's the wisdom that we all can live with. Neither Forrest Gump nor Mr. Rogers changed who they were in order to make a profound difference to the people in their worlds. And my hope for each of us today is that we would know without a doubt that we are loved perfectly for who we are, without having to change even a tiny bit. In God's eyes, we're each perfect. Different, yes. Geeky, sometimes, but perfect. Absolutely perfect. And so may you today recognize that love that God has for you, and may you be that person of encouragement for anybody you may encounter this week who's not feeling perfectly loved, perfectly accepted, or perhaps just feeling that they're wandering through the universe accidental-like, having no idea what their destiny is. Let that person know that they're loved for who they are, and that they can do whatever they really want to do that is from God's wisdom, the kind of wisdom that's gentle and loving and wonderful. Amen.